What is the soul? Where is it? Can you measure it? Touch it? Recreate it? Do near-death experiences, reincarnation, and unexplained brain activity indicate the existence of the soul? These are questions that have intrigued and haunted people since they first walked the earth. Today, in the 21st century, experts are closing in on some answers, using new technology and new understandings to unlock the secrets of the soul. "21 grams, less than 1 ounce, a weight attributed to the soul by a Boston physician in 1907. Dr. Duncan McDougall conducted a ghoulish experiment. He watched 6 people die. Dr. McDougall wanted to know whether the soul existed, so he built a delicate scale to determine whether humans got lighter at the moment of death. In just one of the deaths, McDougall recorded a weight change of less than 1 ounce, 21 grams. His experiment got a tiny mention in the New York Times, more of a curiosity than news. Although no one since has been able to duplicate McDougall's macabre test, it's still remembered today as the first time that modern science attempted to quantify the existence of the soul. Cultures since the beginning of civilization haven't needed nor relied on scientific evidence of the soul. A core belief for most cultures and religions is that when our bodies die, there is an immortal part of us that remains past death, our soul.
All the world's great major religions talk about us as being souls, as truly being spiritual beings that are incarnated here in our bodies, and that the death of our physical body is not the death of us, it's the death of the body. That us, that special spark that is us, I call that the soul, it leaves.
There's a lot of question right now about how much of the irrational, mysterious, supernatural aspects of life we can explain through science. And many, many scientists are directing their attention toward those questions. And I applaud that. But I also think that religion is a language for the stuff that we don't understand. And one of the reasons that religion is so fascinating to me is that it is, by definition, paradoxical, oxymoronic. Like, things don't fit rationally together. You want to live forever and you want to keep changing. You want to have an immortal soul and you want to hug your grandma. You know, these things don't fit together. They're not rational.
To trace the history of the modern Western view of the soul, the trail begins in the 3rd century BC. Alexander the Great swept across Europe and Asia, and Greek thinking spread like wildfire. The Greeks, above all others, set the stage for what we believe about the soul today.
The Greeks believed that your body was unimportant, in fact, even bad. It was the place where all of your most base impulses resided. So lust, greed, hunger, childbearing, everything that was yucky about human life resided in the body. And everything that was good and true about human life resided in the soul, which was in the head. So when you died, your soul ascended to God, and your body resided in the ground. You didn't need it anymore.
The Greeks believed in reincarnation, that the soul can move on to a new body. As Christianity conquered the world, the Greek idea of body and soul being separate things was eclipsed by the evolving Christian notion that body and soul are part of the same whole.
Because in the Greek context, you had your soul went up to heaven after you died, and your body was dirt, dust, nothing. The Christian teaching is that your body and your soul are one thing. You can't have one without the other. Together, they make you, you.
Christian ideas of what does my soul look like raise questions that people joke about. But it remains one of life's great mysteries, where we go and what we are after we die, and which me is my soul.
Am I me when I was, 26? Or am I me when I am 80? Or am I me with my wrinkles? Or am I me without my wrinkles? Am I me with my cancer? Am I me without my cancer? Those questions start to get people hung up, and then they start to be kind of funny and silly. But the yearning itself is real and powerful. So it's a conundrum, like all of these things.
Christian beliefs eventually deviated even further from the Greeks, who considered the soul separate from the body, like an energy force. Christian souls were more like ghosts with shapes.
Like in Dante's Inferno, etc., you see all these souls, okay? They seem like bodies. Dante can recognize them, but, they're souls. They're souls that are shaped like bodies, so they've taken on a certain amount of somatism, which I think shows how hard it is for Christianity to separate body and soul, is that even these souls, which were pronounced as completely immaterial, there's no matter in them, nevertheless, they can be perceived that way.
The West inherited a combination of Greek and Christian apocalyptic ideas about what the soul is, which is more confounding today than it was in its own time. If the soul leaves the body after death, where does it go in the years, or even centuries it may have to wait until the day that Jesus returns to judge the living and the dead?
What do you do in the period between the Last Judgment and when a person dies? Well, what is the soul just on itself? I mean, how do we envisage the soul without the body? It's very, very difficult.
What the scholars of early Christianity say, for example, is that we've made it into a mush. That in those days, there was a word for resurrection, which meant resurrection. And there was a combination of words for immortality of the soul, which meant something different. And now when we talk about heaven and afterlife, we mush it all together. And we mean heaven, and we mean resurrection, and we mean immortality of the soul, and we mean seeing grandma, and we mean seeing Jesus, and we mean hearing harps, and we don't disentangle these ideas. But in the ancient world, they were very distinct ideas. And you were either in the immortality of the soul camp, or you were in the resurrection camp.
Since resurrection involves bodies and immortality involves souls, René Descartes tried to reconcile the two by focusing on consciousness. In the 17th century, he famously wrote, "I think, therefore I am." Since then, scientists believed that if there is a soul, it resides somewhere in the brain, but they haven't found it yet. And today, we're still grappling with the problem. Is the existence of the soul a question for science or religion to answer?
Religion is a way for us to talk about and think about those aspects of human life that are beyond us. And so let science keep probing, because it must, and yet let us keep acknowledging, through whatever language works for us, whether it's poetry or art or religion, that there are aspects to the human experience and to human yearning that fail to meet categories. And I think the soul is one of those things. We want to believe that there's something special about us that lives forever. And we want to believe that we will commune with those we love at some later point. We don't want to lose those people. And those yearnings are powerful and important.
Those yearnings require that consciousness be something separate from the brain, that it is something not material, but magical. The spiritual among us believe one thing.
I have seen men, women, old, young, all faiths, all gender orientations, atheists, believers, all religious traditions. I believe it is a universal human phenomenon. It's part of being human, that we are all souls, and that each soul sometimes has the capacity to have a spiritual experience in certain circumstances.
The scientific among us hold another view.
I don't think consciousness is some supernatural soul that is not measurable scientifically, that's somehow associated with our natural brain. I also don't think there's a mystical world beyond what we can measure. If something actually exists, then it's part of the real world, and ultimately we should be able to detect it.
A Louisiana boy offers incredible evidence that should satisfy both sides of the soul debate. His case offers proof that the soul is real, that it can be reincarnated, and that science can study it. According to a 2007 Pew Research Center poll, 81% of Americans say they believe in an afterlife. 45% believe in ghosts.
I personally had an experience where I saw the spirit of my grandfather after he died. And I haven't gone to the place where I believe it was true. And yet it felt true to me. It felt real to me. And I am very sympathetic with those feelings that people have, you know. They see the ghosts or the spirits of people they've lost. They have a traumatic physical experience and they see things. And I actually think that soul is more a matter of faith than proof.
Today, scientists are studying people who make a compelling case that they used to be someone else. At the University of Virginia, a group of psychiatrists use science to unlock the secrets of reincarnation. Since the 1960s, the Division of Perceptual Studies has been collecting cases of children who claim past life memories. They now have files on 2,500 children.
Well, I think what the research shows is that for people who are open to considering the possibility that there is evidence that consciousness at times can exist separately from a functioning brain. So in the cases of these children's reports, if you look at the best cases, they provide evidence that at times there can be this carryover of memories and emotions that seem carried over from one life and continue on in another.
May 2000, Lafayette, Louisiana. A mother awakens to hear the screams of her 2-year-old son.
He was laying on his back, and he was kicking his feet up like this and pounding his fists like this, just kicking and screaming at the top of his lungs.
Andrea Leininger cannot soothe her baby James. Eventually, he falls back to sleep. She thinks the nightmare is over, but really, it is just beginning.
Then the next night he had another one, and it was the exact same thing, the same exact kicking motion. And the more he had it, the more bizarre it became because it was so specific and so repetitive.
This marked the start of one of the best documented cases of possible reincarnation in history. Today, James Leininger is 12.
I play sports, baseball, soccer, go to Ascension Episcopal School. I have a lot of friends there. The other kids, when they were younger, say, I want to be a fireman. I want to be an astronaut. But I was always, I want to be a fighter pilot. I want to be in the Marines.
Oh, you got your school pictures?
Yeah.
Oh, they came out nice.
From the age of 3, James's parents began to hear stories from their son that shocked them. That their son was recalling things that connected him to a Navy pilot who died in 1945. They were skeptical. Bruce is an HR manager in the oil industry. Andrea is a former ballerina turned instructor. As Christians, they never believed in reincarnation, but they began to piece together an amazing story. The first clue came from the terrifying, non-stop nightmares that James began having at the age of 2.
He was saying, airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out. Airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out. That's when I was like, oh my God, is that what he's been dreaming this entire time?
What he was saying wasn't registering as much on me as what he was doing. He was flailing around in bed, and I remember the very specific thought I had at that point. This looks like The Exorcist. He was freaking out. I had this thought, he possessed. What is going on here?
Within a year, the visions that greeted James in his nightmares began taking shape when he was wide awake.
I was reading to James, and then he sat up and he goes, Mama, the little man's going like this. And he laid down, and he goes, and he did the same thing he did in his dream. He was kicking his feet up, and he goes, the little man's going like this. Ooh, 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 can't get out, can't get out. And I sat him back up, and I said, who's the little man? And he goes, me. It still makes my hair stand up. And Bruce said, what happened to your plane? And he said, it crashed on fire. And he said, why did your airplane crash? And he said, it got shot. And Bruce said, who shot your plane? And he went, oh, the Japanese.
James then gave his parents the next uncanny clue, one that was very specific, the name of a ship from which he says his aircraft took off.
So I said, well, did your boat have a name? And he said, Natoma. And I'd never heard the word before. And I went down the hall and got onto the computer and Googled it. And down around hit 300, all there was this thing, Natoma Bay, CVE 62. Clicked on it, and up comes this history of a World War II aircraft carrier. And so that was the beginning of what the heck is going on here.
Standing there staring at this picture of this little, it was like an aerial photo of this little aircraft carrier in the water, and we just stood there staring at it for a long time.
I had no answers. You know, how could he know this? How could he know a person? How could he know a ship? And what did all this mean? So that was where I really just said, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know what I'm going to find, but I'm not going to stop looking until I get as many answers as I can get.
This was enough to send Bruce on an investigation, doing his own research. Over the next 2 years, he learned about the men from the Natoma Bay, both living and dead. And James kept giving his parents additional, tantalizing, eerie clues.
Well, I kept asking him, do you remember what your name was? Do you remember what your name was? And he always said James. And I thought, well, he's 2, he's confused. He thinks I'm asking him what his name is.
Then, James started drawing.
That was one of my mission things.
The mission thing, you remember that?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite ones.
The same thing, over and over. Like a movie, compressed all into one frame. An air battle. Flak. A plane on fire. And his signature, James 3.
So one day I was in the kitchen, I was washing dishes, James had breakfast, and he had an airplane, he was just flying around like this, and he goes, Mama, before I was born, I was a pilot, and my airplane got shot in the engine and crashed in the water, and that's how I died. And I was just froze. It was such a bizarre thing to say, but it was just that matter of fact. There was no drama, there was no emotion to it.
At 3, James started pretending to be a pilot, with an attention to detail that astonished his father.
One day he dragged a car seat into the closet in my office, and he set up a little cockpit in there. He had a little play school console, and like it was going to be a cockpit, you know, and he's going back and forth. All of a sudden, the door comes flying open, and he comes rolling out of it. I said, James, what happened to you? He says, I said, did you fall? He says, no. He says, my plane got shot, and I bailed out.
The next breakthrough came when Bruce was invited to the Natoma Bay Veterans Reunion. He asked about the names of men killed in battle. And this led him to finally solving the mystery of James 3.
He called me on the phone and he said, you won't believe this, there's only one guy from Natoma Bay who was killed during the battle for Iwo Jima, and his name was James M. Houston Jr. And I said, wait, that would make our James 3. I was so excited. I'm like, that's it. I'm like, that's him. It's James M. Houston. His name is James. It's the James 3.
James Houston Jr., World War II Navy pilot. At age 21, on March 3, 1945, his plane was shot down over Chichijima. Now, the skeptical parents were sitting on compelling proof that their little boy really was reincarnated. Louisiana boy James Leininger spent his childhood recounting memories of being a World War II Navy pilot. Memories of a past life his parents could no longer ignore. From the age of 2 to 6, James continued to provide pieces of evidence of the incredible possibility that he was James Houston, reincarnated.
This plane, the Wildcat, is the plane that James M. Houston crashed in. And he was a test pilot for the Corsair. And he would test fly those off of carriers. The F-18 is the plane I want to fly when I grow up.
Since he was 2, James showed an unusual fascination for military air shows and an uncanny familiarity with vintage aircraft. His parents cautiously made contact with James Houston's only surviving relative, his sister, Anne. At first, she didn't know what to think about the little boy who claimed to be her brother, reincarnated. But then, James asked her for a painting that only one person other than her knew existed.
She sent this January 16th, 2006. Says, "Dear James, I do hope that this is the picture you asked for. It is the only one of me done by my mother. I am sorry to be so long sending it to you. These past few weeks have been very busy and hectic. I hope you like it. With my love, Annie."
James believed then, as he does now, that it was the dead pilot's soul asking for that picture.
I had asked her for a painting that my past mother had done for her and me. This was in her attic for 50 or so years. My parents and she thought it was crazy that I would know about something like this.
Anne, too, became a believer. And there were other, more chilling connections. James had 3 G.I. Joes he named Billy, Walter, and Leon, names his parents thought were strange for a boy to choose.
Bruce is like, "Hey, James, what are you gonna name your G.I. Joe?" And he's just playing, he goes, "Walter." And so we were like, "Walter?" And Bruce goes, "How come you named your G.I. Joes Billy, Walter, and Leon?" And he goes, "Because that's who met me when I got to heaven." And it was one of those moments where like the blood drained out of our face and we just kind of walked backwards. Bruce went in the office, I went in the office, we closed the door. He's in there going through papers like this. I'm like, "What are you looking for? What are you looking for?" He finds this piece of paper and he's like, and he says, "Billy Peeler, Walter Devlin, and Leon Connor were all in the same squadron as James Houston." I was like, "When did they die? Did they die before?" He's throwing papers around, pulls out another sheet, and he looked at the dates of death, and they all died before James Houston died.
They all flew with him.
Although James's dad remained skeptical that reincarnation might really be possible, what happened next was uncanny.
So we're cleaning up the yard. He's playing in the leaves. I said, "I just love you to bits." And he goes, "Well," he said, "I knew you'd be a good daddy when I picked you." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, when I found you and Mommy, I knew you would be good parents." My head was shrinking to the size of a raisin, my brain. I said, "What do you mean when you found us?" He said, "Well, I found you and Mommy. I found you and Mommy in Hawaii."
James told his father that he saw them in a pink hotel, which is where the Leiningers were staying when they decided to have James. Bruce and Andrea were cautious about asking doctors and psychiatrists for help. They decided to find their own solution to James's ordeal. And their solution was to go to Japan, to the very expansive ocean where the pilot, James Houston Jr., died.
"Thou who art the pilot of the souls of men, grant me
The boat was right above where the wreckage of the plane was. And Bruce did this beautiful memorial service. And so I thought that was a perfect moment for me to just say, I sat down with him and I said, Jim Houston's been a part of your life for as long as we can remember. And he's always going to be an important part of who you are. But you have a life to live as James Leininger. And it's time for you to say goodbye to Jim Houston. and he just
Started the ball.
started bawling. And he cried for about 20 minutes.
He had
It
everyone
was
on
the
the
saddest
boat.
thing I ever seen,
He had everyone on the boat.
crying.
It's time for us to say goodbye. To Houston.
Goodbye, James and Houston.
Good job.
I salute you.
Good boy. You're so brave. You're such a brave soul. Such a brave soul and spirit.
It was weird when we got back to shore. It was something had changed.
He left something there.
He really did. It was palpable. You could see that he'd mourned that and everything that had happened and was ready to move on. And he really did at that point. That's kind of when everything really changed.
I'm gonna be the same thing that James M. Houston was, a pilot.
The next picture that James Leininger drew was one of peace. The nightmares stopped. The memories started to fade.
I don't want him to remember anything about his past life. He has a life, you know, and I don't want him to be bogged down or confused or
Well, he's our son, you know. He's not Jim Houston.
got a life to live.
Today, James Leininger can remember nothing specific about the soul that used to torment him. At 12, he is an ordinary boy whose bedroom says something about who he is and who he believes he once was.
I'm in a Boy Scouts. I'm a first-class scout in the Boy Scouts. These are the books I got from Chichijima. Yearbooks, BB gun, my money bag, my phone. I don't know when I got this, but this is my grandmother's rosary and my Star Wars stuff and Blue Angels.
He doesn't talk much about his past life memories with his friends, but he doesn't hide it either if classmates stumble across a story on the internet. To James, reincarnation is a fact of his existence. It's part of his soul.
I believe that the spirit that I used to have when I was 4, 5, 6 has gone away. I'm just James now. It's not, I still have James Houston in me, I think, but it's not so much the bad history. It's more of the peaceful history of his life. Instead of the crashing of the plane, his death. I don't really think about my story so much. I just don't really talk about it. People ask me a question about it, I'll answer it.
You know, I was skeptical the whole way. I still have a hard time really saying, this happened, you know. But it did. So the issue is, you know, how does it happen? I don't know. Why it happens, we can sit here and guess about it, but the fact is that it does happen. And so people should listen closer, should not just give it up because it's a 2-year-old saying something that might sound meaningless to you. From the point of view of the people that we've spoken to that are attempting to do something scientific with it, I can understand rational thinking. I'm a pretty rational guy. This is not something rational. And I had a struggle with that spiritually, but I came to the conclusion that I now have a 3-dimensional belief system instead of 2-dimensional.
At the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, Dr. Jim Tucker has examined James Leininger. Tucker has developed what he calls a strength of case scale for reincarnation, and he gives James a near-perfect score.
Average age when they first start speaking is 38 months, so usually 2 or 3 years old when it comes out. And some of them will talk about these things anytime, day or night. Sometimes the cases can start with nightmares, the way they did in James Leininger's case. Some are intrigued, many are perplexed, some are upset. Some of the Christian parents in the United States are kind of thrown by it. But regardless of their reaction, the children will talk about this for some time, and then usually by the time they get to be 5 or 6, they seem to forget about it and then just go on with their current life.
After 4 decades and 2,500 cases, the researchers at the University of Virginia have come to a startling conclusion. Reincarnation is real.
Which certainly suggests that there is a part of us, a consciousness part, that may be able to continue on after the brain dies, which would indicate that the brain may not be the creator of at least part of our consciousness, but more as sort of a portal that the consciousness flows through, that there may be this other piece of existence separate from the physical world, that there's this consciousness piece, again, that may be independent of the physical world and the physical brains that it seems to come through.
Dr. Paul DeBell is a psychiatrist who specializes in what's called past life regression. Using hypnotism, he's taken countless patients on a voyage back in time to souls their bodies have forgotten. And he provides a recent example.
We'll call him Mr. X. He had been sexually abused as a child, and he was really angry about that. And so he came in for a regression. So he suddenly found himself above a castle in Austria in 1630. He was actually a she, just washing the floors of this castle.
DeBell firmly believes that what he is doing is about finding the soul through science.
I think that spirituality today is in the same point that psychology was 100 years ago, when nobody thought that the mind could be understood. Nobody thought dreams could be understood. Nobody thought mental illness could be understood because it was too complex. But if we use those same tools, which is methodical, systematic investigation with hypotheses and experimental proofs, that then we'll begin to gradually make progress.
Meanwhile, skeptics of reincarnation would say that James Leininger's case is circumstantial at best.
In America, belief in reincarnation is growing. Part of this is driven by celebrities who, say they believe in reincarnation. Julia Roberts recently told Elle magazine that she thought of herself as very Hindu, and she talked about her daughter and how her daughter clearly embodied somebody else. My personal opinion is that Americans like reincarnation because, comparatively speaking, life here is good. And it's one thing to want heaven, which is an eternal destination somewhere else, when life is bad on Earth and you want to get out.
Skeptics aside, to the Leiningers, the existence of the soul does not require the validation of scientists or psychiatrists. James's experience is proof to them of the afterlife. But the question remains, if the soul exists in every human, can it be found and measured by science? One neuroscientist is blazing new trails into how the brain works. He's looking for evidence of consciousness in people who show no signs of consciousness at all. The ancient Egyptians were obsessed with the afterlife, and they maintained that belief across thousands of years. They believed that our souls and bodies were so entangled that they needed one another even in the afterlife. So they perfected mummification. They even stored the mummy's internal organs to keep them safe. They believed the soul was located in the heart. As for the brain, they declared it had no function, so they removed it through the nose and threw it away. The ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus believed that the soul was made up of atoms dispersed into the cosmos after death. In the 17th century, philosopher René Descartes made a revolutionary declaration when he equated the soul with consciousness. I think, therefore I am. If the Egyptians believed that the soul was in the heart, Descartes was certain that it resided somewhere in the brain. The field of neuroscience was born. Scientists started to poke around, looking inside the human brain, searching for the soul. But they never found it. No one is even sure where to look within the brain's 100 billion neurons. Some scientists even say it's an impossible mystery to solve, given the brain's complexity. But others are determined to prove that the brain is the key to unlocking the secrets of the soul.
In medical school, we were given a brain to dissect as part of our neuroanatomy class. And they brought out this preserved brain in formaldehyde. It was my opportunity to do a brain dissection. And you have a manual, so I put the manual next to me, and they give you a little probe, and they tell you, okay, first thing to do is start to probe away from the cortex and gently remove this layer of cells. And I thought to myself, did I just, peel away what would have been this patient's recollection of a summer during a childhood picnic, or a relationship with a particularly significant person in their lives? What did I just remove from this piece of brain that was once something?
Well, I think soul and mind are interchangeable, and I think, as a neuroscientist, mind and brain are interchangeable.
For 20 years, Dr. Adrian Owen has been studying which parts of the brain are active for different specific activities.
Well, our mind is a product of the complex brain that we have. I think the reason we feel that we all have a soul and that my soul is different to your soul is because my brain is different to your brain.
For Dr. Owen, the brain is the key to solving the mystery of who we are. And he's trying to prove that by working with patients in vegetative states.
Have you look at some pictures, Chris. I want you to try and look. All right, here's you and Randy and Walt. You're all in your uniforms.
Chris was an officer in training at West Point Military Academy. In 2007, his car was rear-ended. He nearly died. Instead, he survived with permanent brain damage. But the Chris that was there, a young, bright cadet with his life ahead of him, was gone.
Chris, do you see the picture of you and your friends?
And you can't imagine, in your worst nightmares. I've seen families go through this, but until it happens to you, you have no concept as to how heartbreaking it is. There are times when you feel like, they're not there. Other times that you feel like very strongly that he's there, he's listening, making eye contact with me. And it's so hard to pinpoint. Where is he? Is he here? Is he locked in? We don't really have any answers. I don't believe that Chris doesn't have a soul. I think there's that spark of life that leaves you at the moment of death is basically what the soul is. And Chris might not have be conscious, but he's still here. I definitely feel like soul is more than just consciousness.
Chris, I have a hammer and a ball. I want you to look at the ball.
What Dr. Owen's research is trying to prove is whether Chris is, clinically speaking, as conscious now as he was before his accident.
With consciousness, you have a big problem that the only way I can tell you that I am conscious is through some sort of action, either by, telling you or by demonstrating. If you take something like so-called disorders of consciousness, vegetative state, minimally conscious state, you don't have those things with some of these patients. They are, by definition, unable to produce the sorts of responses that the rest of us would use to demonstrate that we were conscious.
For Dr. Owen, what began as a simple study of consciousness turned into an unprecedented discovery. He conducted tests on a 23-year-old woman in a vegetative state. The results have revolutionized science's understanding of the brain.
She was the victim of a road traffic accident and had been examined periodically for 5 months, and on each examination had all of the necessary criteria for a diagnosis of vegetative state. So we put her in the fMRI scanner, and we asked her to imagine playing a game of tennis. In this scan, when you hear the word tennis, I want you to imagine standing on a tennis court playing a game of tennis. We picked this task because it's something that we've tried many times in healthy volunteers, and we know this produces quite a specific activation in an area in the middle and the front of the brain called the supplementary motor area. And this area controls upper body movements, and if you lie in the scanner and imagine moving your body around as you would if you were playing a game of tennis, you get very strong activation in this area of the brain. So while she was in the scanner, we instructed her that when she heard the word tennis, we'd like her to start imagining this task and carry on until we said rest. And when we did this, her brain activated just like a healthy volunteer. So on this basis, we concluded that she wasn't vegetative at all. She was entirely consciously aware. That was pretty exciting. We had another task that we used. It was important to show that this wasn't just an automatic reaction, but if we changed the task, the brain activation would change. So we used a type of spatial navigation task where we asked her to imagine moving from room to room in her house. And this pretty much always activates an area deep inside the brain called the parahippocampal gyrus in healthy volunteers. Never seen it before in a vegetative patient, but nonetheless, when we asked her to imagine moving from room to room in her house, the parahippocampal gyrus activated just as it would in a healthy volunteer.
Owen's groundbreaking work opens new questions about where consciousness begins and ends. Scotty was a New York City police officer who was hit by a car in 2002.
I feel he's here. When I speak to him, I don't know how to put this,
I think he's still there. Oftentimes I sit aside and I say to myself, what is he thinking? Because he can't speak to us, you know? What is he thinking? But I'll give you an example. We have this ball at home. He actually kicks the ball. I become the target. He will hit me with it, and he'll laugh. He'll laugh at me. And I feel that it's me that he's targeting. Yeah,
he's there, and he's the same Scotty. He just can't get out.
Is your name Scotty? Yes or no? Look at the card that has your answer.
Owen has proven that despite no signs of outward awareness, for some, an inner spark remains. And within that undiscovered brain may be where we find the soul. For the indigenous peoples of the Americas, humans are the minority in a world inhabited primarily by spirits. A common thread through these beliefs, from the Cherokee to the Haida, is that transformation takes place when a child is about to harmonize his soul with the spirit world around him. At this critical moment, spirit guides lead an adolescent into adulthood, and the human soul is unleashed. In today's Western society, children are born with souls. The soul and body are linked.
One of the central tenets of the Christian faith is that Christ rose from the dead, right? And I think it's very reassuring for people because they do associate body with identity, to have both the body and soul. And in fact, you know, in Christianity, it's very, very hard to separate body, soul, because, you know, they're described as kind of a marriage to each other.
Professor Alison Gopnik doesn't believe in the eternal soul, but her research into the uncharted areas of children's brains has led her to the conclusion that what some would call the spirit is closest to us when we are children.
I'm a scientist, an atheist, a materialist. I think everything that's here is everything that's here. But I also think that many of the feelings and experiences and intuitions and knowledge and truth that people have talked about when they've talked about the soul or the spiritual or the transcendent, those experiences where we recognize the meaning and beauty and significance of everything that's going on around us. I think those are the moments when we're most like children.
This is my machine, and I want you to figure out how the machine works, okay?
Gopnik set out to solve the problem At what age does identity switch on? When does I think, therefore I am begin? She wanted to study infants. Her colleagues told her she was wasting her time.
When I was going to Oxford, when I was a graduate student, one of the people there told me when I first arrived that this entire research program I had was useless because babies didn't have a higher cortex. They didn't have any of the higher brain areas that we had as adults.
Which one of these would be better for making the box cup?
Which do you think?
I think this one.
After 20 years of research, Gopnik has helped prove that the neurons in children's brains display more activity than those in adults. Where the adult brain is a spotlight, the child's is more like a lantern, illuminating in all directions.
So there's been a big, big change from this view of babies as what I think of as being sort of crying carrots, sort of semi-vegetables, to the ones who are doing the most learning, solving the hardest problems, and doing it incredibly quickly.
Gopnik believes that preschool children represent human R&D. Her studies indicate that they play and learn with the same intent. She believes that we learn to survive in the world as grown-ups, and we play to try and imagine ways to change it.
It's as if, instead of just looking at one little part of the world, they're conscious of the entire manifold of everything that's going on around them at once. I think a good way of appreciating this as an adult is think about what happens when, for instance, you go and travel to a strange place. Everything around you is something that's captivating and engaging and different and new. And you get this very vivid, very wide-ranging awareness of everything that's going on around you at once. I think that's what it's like to actually be a baby.
Gopnik's studies have shown that adult brains only light up when we are trying to learn something new, and even then, only in certain areas.
In fact, I think one of the interesting things about us as adults is that we're unconscious, as it were, so much of the time.
Tests have shown that a baby's brain is lit up most of the time.
One way I've put this is to say, for children, every day is first love in Paris. Every step is skydiving. Every peekaboo game is Einstein discovering the theory. I think babies and young children are genuinely perceiving that aspect of the way the world and the universe works. That means that they're the kind of exemplars of what it means to have a soul.
But Gopnik's research shows that when a child becomes self-aware, the brain activity slows down, and the connection with what some call the soul begins to weaken.
So between about 3 and 5, you start seeing children having what we call autobiographical memory. Not just remembering information from the past, even newborns can do that, but constructing a narrative that says, I am the same person that I was in the past, and I am the same person I'm going to be in the future.
Does the identity that we develop as we grow eclipse our infant consciousness? Were we once closer to our souls? Surprisingly, anesthesia may hold the answer to those questions.
Until relatively recently, babies weren't administered anesthesia. Now it turns out that babies actually need more anesthesia than, relatively speaking, than adults do.
Why? What is anesthesia? Do we really know? It seems that anesthesia poses its own mysteries about consciousness and the soul. An Arizona anesthesiologist stumbled upon a theory of where his patients go when they're under anesthesia, proving to him the existence of the soul.
I've been practicing anesthesiology for 35 years now, and it's still a kick. It's still amazing every time patients lose their consciousness. At the end, we wake them back up, and I wonder, where did they go? But the real question is, why are they conscious in the first place? So anesthesia is a really good tool to try to figure out what is missing in the anesthetized patient.
Here we go. You can come with us.
Anesthesia is a mystery. It's been around since 1846, but no one is quite sure exactly how it works or where we go when we're put under.
We'll take good care of her for you.
In the 19th century, people started experimenting with laughing gas, nitrous oxide, and they used it for parties. Everybody had a good time. They literally were laughing constantly. And also another gas called ether, diethyl ether, leading to ether frolics. When inhaled in low amounts, people got disinhibited and ebullient and had a great time. And somebody realized if they had too much, they would become unconscious and actually insensitive to pain. And so a number of people began to attempt to use these gases for surgical anesthesia. Slide over. Okay, this arm can go over here.
After years of risky trial and error, doctors perfected the drugs, but they didn't understand the science. In fact, no one understands what happens to the mind under anesthesia.
Generally, one does not dream under anesthesia. There's no consciousness. You're just gone for the duration of the anesthetic. You tell me when you're asleep, okay? That's a trick question. You can't do that. One interesting thing about anesthesia is that patients who are under anesthesia, after they wake up, have no conception of elapsed time whatsoever. And I think the passage of time is a key feature of subjective consciousness. So consciousness is just absent. It's gone.
A brain scanner connected to the patient reveals a startling clue to how anesthesia works. During the surgery, a bright flashing halogen light is used to help stimulate brain response. The bright light pierces her taped-shut eyelids. The EEG monitor shows that the patient's brain is responding just as if she were awake.
We see that the brain is quite active, and there's all kinds of evoked potentials going on.
Going under is not like sleep, and this fascinates Hammeroff.
I first got interested in consciousness, how the brain produces experience in college. In medical school, I was doing a research elective in a lab studying cancer, and I was looking at how cells divide.
Hammeroff then learned about microtubules. Microtubules are hollow tubes that can be found in all living cells. 30 years ago, he had his eureka moment, and since then, he has formed a complex theory that microtubules are the location of what some would call the soul.
In my opinion, microtubules are the origin of consciousness, specifically quantum computation synchronized to gamma EEG inside neurons in the brain is the origin of consciousness.
Hammeroff's theory has shocked the world of neuroscience. He's basically saying that consciousness may be found and quantified, that it has substance, and that it survives the body.
I'll stand by this, even though it's a bit controversial. It's conceivable that when a patient has a cardiac arrest or dies, the quantum information that involves consciousness isn't necessarily destroyed, or it may actually just sort of leak out and remain in the universe and remain entangled. If the patient's revived, then it can go back in and the patient had a near-death and out-of-body experience. If the patient dies, it's conceivable to me that that entity, which you could call the soul, remains entangled indefinitely. And so it's conceivable that the soul is a real entity in terms of quantum information embedded in the fundamental level of the universe.
What Hammeroff is saying is that the 21 grams myth is basically true. The soul has substance. Though it can't be weighed, the information can be measured. Hammeroff's shocking theory has caught the attention of the world's top physicists, who think that he may have stumbled onto understanding how the mind and soul separate. Complex quantum physics may hold the key.
Quantum theory is pretty intriguing and is not necessarily consistent with a simple materialist understanding of the universe. The things are more complicated than we're aware. But I think people who just immediately discount it as being sort of mystic mumbo-jumbo, I think they're being too quick with that. That quantum theory does challenge us to try to really understand the world, the physical world at its core. And it may well be more complicated or more wondrous than what a lot of people realize.
This comes as no surprise to those who have died and come back to tell the tale. Most cultures throughout time have held that there is something that survives the body after death. 21st century science is seeking to prove it.
Science says that consciousness is limited to and generated by the brain. Very clear, very straightforward.
After 10 seconds without oxygen, the brain starts to die. After 5 minutes, it's completely gone. But what happens to consciousness in that precious 5 minutes? New research suggests that consciousness might actually leave the brain.
The near-death experience in cardiac arrest says something different. It says when the brain is not functioning, then consciousness can separate from the brain and is able to gain information which becomes accessible when you regain consciousness. Now that is an astonishing statement.
Yvonne Kason is a family doctor in Toronto. 30 years ago, she nearly died in a small plane crash in which someone was killed. It changed her life forever.
We flew into really bad weather, and the engine stopped working, so the plane started crashing. So we were plummeting down to the ground. There was terrible turbulence, and the air was shaking, and my immediate reaction was intense terror. I was terrified. I was frightened. The plane was crashing. I was going to die. And what happened was, I had this feeling like my fear was being pushed out, and this calm and peace was descending upon me. And I entered sort of a paranormal, peaceful state.
The plane crashed into an icy lake in a wilderness area, hundreds of miles from the nearest town.
Then what happened is my near-death experience deepened. Suddenly, as I was swimming to shore and starting to freeze, I heard this whoosh noise, and it was like my consciousness got whisked out of my body, and I was no longer in my body that was swimming to shore. Suddenly, I was like 20 or 30 feet above my body looking down, and it was me still trying to swim to shore.
Miraculously, a helicopter pilot hearing of a downed plane came to her rescue. She was rushed to hospital. Nearly dead from hypothermia, she was immersed in hot water, but there was little hope.
And it was in that hot water that my consciousness re-entered my body. And what I experienced was something like this. It was like what I imagine if a genie were sucked into a bottle. That with a loud whoosh, I was sucked in from this expanded place up there and abruptly sucked into the small confines of my body.
Kason now combines her medical practice with helping others who have had near-death experiences. She is convinced, after studying hundreds of cases, that the soul is not merely consciousness. It is an energy force all on its own. Every world religion holds the belief that there is something that survives the body after death. But modern Western society still rejects near-death experiences, calling them paranormal. This despite the fact that every year, hundreds of thousands of people die and report the experience. At the time, Kason did not know whether she was alone.
Had anyone else had an experience like this? And what is it called? What is this that happened to me?
Dr. Peter Fenwick has studied the phenomena of near-death experience for years. Initially a skeptic, he is now a believer.
As far as near-death experiences are concerned, I didn't believe them. They happened in America, they happened in California, they certainly wouldn't happen in London. What we found out was that near-death experiences are very common. So I think we have to see consciousness no longer as just a point source generated by the brain, ends at death. It may do, but I think the evidence now is beginning to be against this. It looks as if it may split from the brain at the time of death.
Fenwick is doing a study of 1,500 heart attack patients who have had near-death experiences. He's placed objects in the ER room that the patient cannot see, unless the patient's consciousness somehow leaves his or her body. According to his study, the mind and the brain are not the same thing. They are separate. Although near-death experiences have been reported for decades, it's only recently that science has been willing to consider them as evidence of the soul. 13 million Americans have reported a near-death experience. The statistics are as high in other countries, and the stories have striking similarities.
It was 1972, and my car was sideswiped by a tank, or a car that was as big as a tank. I had a small fiberglass sports car, and I was virtually run over in my own car.
Horribly injured, comatose, and near death, Howard Tibble lay in the critical care ward of a hospital.
Evidently, for the next 3 days, in intense pain, unable to talk to anybody or correspond in any way. I didn't know where I was, and I didn't know what was going on. Suddenly, it was nighttime. I knew it was night because the lights were on in the ward. And I felt no fear or pain or worry.
I heard so many stories of people who came to me and said that when they tried to tell somebody about their experience, let's take, for example, a near-death experience, that perhaps they spoke to their doctor and their doctor pathologized it and said that it was a hallucination, or maybe they'd had a brief psychotic break, or maybe that was some unconscious, unresolved neurotic issue. Always a negative label, which people who'd had such a positive experience, the label didn't fit. They were not getting validation.
This feeling of safety and peace has been reported in almost all near-death experiences. The next step is also almost universal, an out-of-body experience. Fully conscious, the dead person floats around the room, seeing objects that could not be seen face up on the bed.
I took myself on a little tour of the ward, just floating around. And this was a hospital with a high ceiling. And they had strip lights. And I floated up to the side of this strip lamp, and it had the word Osram, and I was 1 foot from it. I could have touched it, but I had no hands to touch it. And I didn't find it odd or anything. I thought, well, there you go. Osram make lamps, you know, it's fine with me.
The next step for most people is the soul's return to the body, bringing a memory of the experience that is not like a dream. It seems real.
We use the word soul as if it were a sort of thing that flies away to heaven, and it could be consciousness, it could be a mind, it could be a number of things. I actually believe it's the way out from here to start the journey to wherever we go. But I don't think we have to be religious to make that journey. I've not been that good in my life, you know. Rock and roll.
Clinical studies on near-death experiences indicate that something untangles itself from a dying body. But research has a long way to go before proving that a spirit-like something truly exists.
Whether or not we'll be able to validate the idea that there is a soul is always going to be an open question, because of course we never know. But what we do is we take information from some of the wider experiences which we can have. And if you take all those together, then you would argue that in some way, the old idea of there being different levels within the body, and some of these are able to continue after death, is a very good hypothesis, yeah.
81% of Americans believe in the soul. And yet out-of-body experiences are marginalized with UFO sightings and seeing ghosts. Fenwick's research aims to change that. He even believes science will soon be able to prove the existence of telepathy, linked souls speaking across space and time.
Do I think the consciousness can exist outside the brain? Well, there's lots of evidence to show that. They're all the telepathy experiments. In my field, there is what happens as you approach death. And there is something called deathbed coincidences. The dying person seems to make a visit to other people, but it's other people with whom they're closely emotionally attached. It's usually a strong emotional feeling that something has happened to somebody. And the evidence for this is getting very good. And I suspect in the course of the next few years will become much more into the mainstream.
While some scientists grapple with the survival of consciousness after the death of the body, others are trying to touch the soul with the help of a shaman. Dr. Frank Eckenhofer has traveled to the jungles of Peru to take a powerful drug that he thinks can help him measure his soul. And he's going to use 21st century EEG technology to help him do it.
My topic is awakening of the mind. And it's really very dangerous to say that in a scientific forum, because that doesn't seem like a legitimate scientific topic. It's a religious topic. This field of consciousness, the reason it's somewhat conservative, it's touching this dangerous third rail of science where you're getting very close to what's called religion. So I think there's a resistance or a not being sure how to bring scientific methods into this edge where science studies consciousness, but not just consciousness, but something that really is religion. It's a religious experience.
In recent years, Dr. Eckenhofer has been intrigued by a powerful plant-based substance that massively alters consciousness. The substance is called ayahuasca. Don Guillermo is the local shaman who has mastered the art of preparing and experiencing ayahuasca.
Tenemos aquí la famosa planta ayahuasca. Ayahuasca es una planta visionaria, ¿no?, que los curanderos utilizamos para descubrir los secretos ocultos, ya sea dentro de la mente.
Ayahuasca comes from an Indian word that means vine of the soul. It's seen by many as a direct route to the divine. Illegal in many Western countries, ayahuasca's potency depends on the skills of the shaman who cultivates, harvests, and prepares it.
Como dicen, plantas sensibles, plantas inteligentes, pero dentro sí tiene su alma que nos escucha, nuestra voz, ¿no? Y muchas veces en sueño o intuitivamente o en visiones nos puede comunicar.
Ayahuasca is taken in the form of a potion. Sections of ayahuasca vine are crushed and boiled with chacruna leaves in 30 liters of water, then boiled down. Ayahuasca is the liter of liquid that remains. Over the centuries, those who have taken ayahuasca have reported out-of-body experiences and encounters with beings that can only be described as souls. Dr. Eckenhofer is focusing his studies of ayahuasca on the elevated levels of certain and usually dormant brain activities that take place under the drug's influence. He has studied the brain patterns of Buddhist monks, and he thinks they hold the key. Buddhist monks achieve altered states of consciousness through meditation. The Buddhists believe they reach a heightened state of awareness that brings them closer to what's been called the universal soul. Dr. Eckenhofer will be hooked up to the EEG to find out, after he ingests the drug, whether there are measurable changes in the neuron activity in his brain.
The EEG is very sensitive to these subtle shifts in consciousness. There's major pattern changes that occur in the EEGs. And I've made measurements, and I found that there's certain very interesting frequencies. And so these frequencies are indicators of this state change.
Eckenhofer drinks the ayahuasca potion. It takes about half an hour before its effect kicks in. When it does, he won't be able to communicate what he is feeling. Only the EEG can capture the data.
In the very beginning, you'll have a kind of subtle change in how your body feels, and then slowly the psychedelic experiences will start. You might see floating patterns, and then it merges into imagery that seems to have more complex forms. Could be images of people or faces. And then it becomes like a waking dream. Then there's another quality of experience. It's called a journey. So the journey is where I think what's happening is an out-of-body experience is occurring. By that time, it's feeling like you are somewhere else. Sometimes when you go to another world, you'll meet an entity of some kind. It's possible you could be taught things by entities. Just like in Christianity, we have stories of how people have been taught things by angelic entities that have come.
It represents, it brings down channels. So sometimes the movements are very fast and intricate. Somehow they're synchronized.
As he slips into an altered state, Eckenhofer starts moving his hands as if he is conducting an unseen orchestra. His researchers hope the EEG records this spike in activity, supporting Eckenhofer's theory that ayahuasca can point the way to touching the soul. Eckenhofer can recall only impressions lost in his own consciousness. The next morning, he is firmly back in scientific mode, examining the story that the EEG data is telling. Once the ayahuasca took full effect, his brain entered an even more heightened state of consciousness.
Okay, so we're starting here and we're going and searching some part of alpha.
Oh! Ooh, that's the part.
Whatever he saw, Eckenhofer may have seemed in a near coma, but in fact, his brain was on fire. Eckenhofer's EEG tests prove that in an altered trance-like state, the brain behaves much like it would in an out-of-body experience or a religious rapture. To him, this is what it means to see the soul.
To me, the word soul is more of a Western formulation, Western kind of religious category, actually. I feel that soul, it's a meeting place between the formless dimension of spirituality and the physical world. Perhaps that could be viewed as soulful or a connecting point.
As one group seeks to find evidence of enhanced consciousness inside their own minds, another is trying to see if they can create it by building a brain. Frankenstein's monster, a thinking being created by science, more powerful than its maker, ultimately outcast for being feared and misunderstood. Mary Shelley's famous monster lives on across almost 2 centuries of popular culture, because the story of Frankenstein is a story that scares us to our very souls. Dr. Frankenstein was a Swiss scientist who was obsessed with the spark of human life. It's only fitting that another scientist has chosen Switzerland to launch a 21st century equivalent project. For 15 years, Dr. Henry Markram has been working on a biology-modeled machine that can think just like we do. Dr. Markram is leader of the Blue Brain Project. Blue Brain uses one of the world's most powerful supercomputers to reverse engineer the human brain.
Many people ask, why are you doing that? I mean, why do you want to build a model when there's 6 billion of us out there? What will it be useful for, and can it really be useful? And ultimately, what we're after is trying to understand and learn about the brain and what it's capable of. Is it really the same as us? Is it the same as a human being? Does it capture it?
The project's goal is to mimic the complex structure of the human brain in a computer and see if it has the ability to reason, just like we do.
I think that what Blue Brain is fundamentally different from most models is that we're not trying to just build a model in the simplest way possible. We're trying to build a model in the most biological way possible.
If an artificial brain can be created in a biological fashion, Markram says he can't predict whether it will or will not become a conscious brain.
Our strategy is that if we build it correctly and we understand it from first principles, that it will emerge and it will speak and it will have higher brain functions. And I don't know, it may or may not have consciousness.
Like Dr. Frankenstein, the Blue Brain team is using living material to create their creature. Not human parts, but rats. Human neurons are strikingly similar to those of rats. First, a rat is decapitated. A thin slice of its still active brain is submerged in artificial brain fluid, allowing the brain tissue to keep functioning for several hours. The tissue is placed under a microscope. A single neuron is extracted. Then, the basic shapes and reactions of the rat's still living neurons are mapped. These graphs are real images from Blue Brain, showing the activity of the rat's neurons that the computer has recreated for its own mind.
Any mechanism we can find in the human brain, we could replicate in a machine. Is it conscious? Some people will say no, it's just a machine, it's just software. A program can't be conscious. Other people, like myself, would say, well, we're just a program. We have 100 billion neurons, and we can actually understand precisely what's going on in each one.
The neurons taken from living rat brains form the template of Dr. Markram's artificial consciousness. His computer maps then imitates the neuron's actions. Basically, Markram is building a brain, one computer-generated neuron at a time.
The secret is to look for the rules. And then you don't need to have studied every single neuron in the brain. You build a model of 100 of them, not a billion. And once you build 100, you can analyze them, and you can analyze their statistics, and you analyze their rules. And those rules now you can use to recreate all the diversity, billions. So we can actually today create well over a couple of 100 different types of neurons, and we can build as many of them as we want. It's not limited.
Others are not so certain that the Blue Brain and other artificial intelligence projects of the future can ever succeed. Consciousness, some believe, is too complex.
AI is very interesting. You can't make a horse out of feathers. It would be very tough to make a computer out of cloth. And you can't make a conscious mind out of silicone chips.
Constructing a human brain will require a computer 1,000 times more powerful than any currently in existence. It would take at least 3 football fields to house such a computer. But Markram says the goal is within reach, to create a conscious artificial intelligence.
The data is there. The technology is there to explore it. The computing power has reached critical mass. We have petaflop supercomputers now, 10 to the 15 calculations per second. It's the first time in history that these things are coming together, which is required for simulation-based research. When they converge, it's inevitable. So this is going to happen.
Professor Markram hopes to complete his work on his artificial brain within the next 10 years. What properties will that brain ultimately possess? Will it consider itself equal to us? Will it have emotions, or a personality, or a soul?
When it comes to thinking about artificial intelligence, of course, we all have to think about that moment when we develop artificial intelligence that's just a little bit smarter than we are. So maybe as a consequence, once you've got the one that's one step better than we are at doing all these things, it's capable of producing an AI that's 2 steps better than we are. And it's then going to be capable of producing an AI that's 4 steps better than we are. And so on, and off you go. And you're on to the kind of the runaway loop that some people have called the technological singularity.
The singularity is the moment predicted by futurists when machines become conscious and more capable than humanity. A dangerous time when they could, conceivably, overpower us, even exterminate us.
So, I mean, I think that point of the singularity is still a number of decades away, but as it approaches, I think it's going to be something we have to really slow down and think about very carefully.
If Professor Markram succeeds, will Blue Brain turn out to be the singularity? Will it make human existence better, or much, much worse? If it is evil, will it allow Markram to turn it off? Will it be a soulless Frankenstein that puts its makers to death? Hiroshi Ishiguro is working on designing a world where humans and robots are indistinguishable. And almost by accident, he's challenging the notion of where people and their souls begin and end. Ishiguro brings a companion along for his interview, himself.
This is my android, and this is the Geminoid.
Ishiguro uses silicone, steel, and mold impressions of his own body to create a life-sized version of himself, one that could take his place in the classroom. Professor Ishiguro teaches at Osaka University. He wants to see how his students will behave when forced to interact with his android instead of himself. Ishiguro can foresee a day when his androids will not only enable people to be in two places at the same time, but to join the workforce to perform unpleasant but necessary jobs. Ishiguro has thought a lot about whether his robots could be advanced enough to be given consciousness. But the Japanese have a unique view that does not equate consciousness with a soul.
Everything has souls, the rocks and, the chairs and desks and, everything has a soul. I think that is a fundamental difference between Japan and other countries. The human is not so special for Japanese. Human is a part of nature, that's all.
Ishiguro is part of an ancient Japanese tradition of making lifelike machines. According to tradition, the soul of the creator is in the object, and in Japan it's believed the creation, too, must have a soul.
それは理論的にはね、魂がないとは言えるんです。それはそれで、日本人っていうのはどういうんですかね、魂を作り出すんですね。いわゆる盆栽にしても、生け花にしても、お茶にしても、すべてですね、いわゆるそういう言うたら作り出すという。で、僕らはこの人形を作る時に魂を入れるっていうんですね。で、やはり一生懸命作るとですね、それがこう生きてるように思えてくるわけですね。
What is the soul? What is the consciousness? What is the intelligence? What is the emotions? My answer is that these things are subjective. If we believe the robot has a soul, the robot has a soul. When I developed the humanoid robot, everybody said, oh, this robot has emotion, right? But I didn't implement any function of emotion, right? So obviously, these things are subjective, not objective.
By giving robots personality and emotion, it can appear to humans as though they have souls. In Okinawa, Japan, robots called Paro are being manufactured by the thousands, each with a unique ability to learn how to react to human feelings. Paro are companions for Japan's vast population of elderly people. Known as robot-assisted therapy, the mechanical companions are equipped with pattern recognition technology that can read the mood of their owners and act appropriately to calm and soothe them. After getting to know its owner, each Paro develops a unique personality and its own emotional range. It's a computerized simulation of feelings. Professor Ishiguro's ultimate goal is to exceed Paro's emotions, to build an android that looks, moves, and talks like a real human. Apart from his Geminoid, he's created a female android that has advanced emotional expressions. Equipped with facial recognition software, it can even watch another human being on a monitor and mimic her expression. Cost $100,000 per robot. But there's a challenge.
The problem is getting more difficult. For example, the body movement. This is natural. The reaction is also natural like this, right? However, the medical doctor said that this is a kind of a brain-damaged person. That we need to work with the brain scientists, and we need to have the deeper knowledge about the human. Then we can improve this robot.
The brain contains 100 billion neurons stretched out across 100,000 miles of dense blood vessels. Neuroscience has only begun to figure out how it all works. While some scientists actively seek to create consciousness, others are stumbling into it, almost by accident encountering the soul. In the near future, one or the other might have to answer to the question, is there something that survives the body?
Well, consciousness is mysterious, and I believe when we create non-biological systems that have that same kind of behavior and the same complexity and richness of emotional intelligence, which is also a form of intelligence, they will be conscious as well.
If you ask somebody, do you believe you have an immortal soul, or do you believe you have a soul? I think that people would be exposing what are their most heartfelt hopes, their worst fears. So I think it's much easier for us to focus on what we can apprehend, our intelligence. How smart are we? IQs. Is that a measure of the soul? It certainly is a measure of the reasoning faculty, the intellect. So it doesn't have anything to do with the imagination. So it's a very limited view of what the soul is, and also a very temporal view.
Meanwhile, others believe that the more we seek scientific answers, the more likely we are to accept the fact that the soul exists.
I believe science and religion are coming together. And I think it's just simply going to take more time. And maybe in another 100 years, most people on the planet will know that the soul is real.
What does seem certain is that artificial intelligence will be able to think like us and robots to look like us within a generation. If the two combine, humans will live side by side with a new synthetic intelligent species. Whether they have souls is a matter of heated debate. Either way, the 21st century may well be the age when the existence of the soul is proven beyond all dispute. Whatever the answer, the secrets of the soul, science's grasp.